Hello, BookTube. I'm back with another secondhand mail haul. This one's a little more variety. The first one suggested itself because it was just this stack of fat biographies. This is has more variety, and I thought some of it might interest you. The first one being a complete indulgence for me. The Source Books Casablanca started putting these things out about 20 years ago. They're all lovely. It's the novels of Georgette Heyer, who I just adore. These novels are just fantastic. They cannot fail to please. And this one is The Reluctant Widow. Let me read you when Eleanor Rochdale boards the wrong coach, she ends up not at her prospective employer's home, but at the estate of Eustace Cheviot, a dissipated and ruined young man on the verge of death. His cousin, Mr. Ned Carillon, persuades Eleanor to marry Eustace as a simple business arrangement. By morning, Eleanor is a rich widow and finds herself embroiled in an international spy ring, housebreakers, uninvited guests, and the murder. And Mr. Carillon won't leave her alone. uh, you can't go wrong with Heyer. She's fantastic. And I'm very happy that Source Books Casablanca put out her enormous shelf of books in these lovely trade paperbacks. I wouldn't mind if somebody else did it too. I'm happy to keep her constantly in print. And the next one is an indulgence as well, and it's not even an indulgence for me. It's an indulgence for one of you, because I shop now with BookTube in mind. And it was free. It was 50 cents. And it's this one volume collection of the first 3 books of the Dragon Riders of Pern by Anne McCaffrey. It's Dragonfly, Dragon Song, and the White Dragon. And it's the story of the planet Pern, which has an eccentric, has human colonists, and it has an eccentric satellite, which is home to spores, deadly spores that kill organic contact, that kill organic material on contact. But when the human colonists settled this planet in orbit around Rookbat, they didn't know that. The initial astronomical surveys, the orbit of the satellite was so distant and eccentric that the initial surveys didn't take it into account. So the human colonists arrived, set up, cannibalized their spaceship, couldn't leave. When all of a sudden, this planet came close enough to Pern's atmosphere to release these spores, they look like thread as they fall, into the atmosphere, raining death on everything alive. And the early colonists discovered, of course, that if you have stone keeps and no grass anywhere, you're not quite as vulnerable to the devastation caused by thread. And they also noticed that the native lizards of the planet had a built-in defense of their own for thread, which was the ability to wink from one place to another, to teleport. And the colonists set about genetically engineering these lizards to be not only enormous, but semi-intelligent, telepathic, to bond with humans. These books, Dragonfly especially is the first one, take place generations and generations and generations later, when Pern has devolved into a feudal society, and when the eccentric neighbor has been gone for so long when Dragonflight starts, that local landowners have become lax. They've allowed grass to grow on their property. They haven't tithed to the Dragon Riders of Pern, whose only purpose is to protect the world from threadfall. They don't believe it anymore. They don't believe that it happens anymore. And this is the story takes up with this eccentric satellite returning and dropping thread on Pern. And McCaffrey just has a ball. She takes that incredibly good premise and has a ball with it. Explores the people, explores the dragons, and then eventually, slightly at the urging of some of her fans. This was in the days before Orson Scott Card and George R.R. Martin were having fans write their books for them, or having fans weigh in and listening to them. But when occasionally a brave fan would approach McCaffrey at a convention, enough of those pointed out to her that there's probably no good reason in physics why those dragons couldn't teleport through time as well as space, and of course she had to explore that. And it's just she works out the world building to a fairly well. And these three make a really good trilogy. They weren't made as one. They weren't intended as one. And the fourth book, Mareta, Dragon Lady of Pern, is also really, really good, dealing with a very simple question: what would happen to a world that had evolved into a feudal level of society and science if a modern day contagious disease broke out, in this case influenza? What would that world do? It's not a space alien. It's not a weird indigenous creature with 3 eyes, but it's every bit as deadly. But anyway, I already have the Dragon Riders of Pern. I have a box set of the mass markets, and I also have this volume. But when I saw a perfect condition second copy, I had to get it because maybe one of you will be interested in having it. And that's what I'm here for. The next one is a book. I've mentioned this on this channel before, how sometimes when I'm used book shopping, I will see something that's relatively new, and it will act as a kind of reminder, sometimes even a guilty reminder, that I ignored it the first time around. And that's true with this book. This came out in 2013, and I ignored it. It's Philip Shendon. It's a cruel and shocking act. It's an investigation into the JFK assassination. The subtitle is actually The Secret History of the Kennedy Assassination, and it's by a longtime reporter who also did a book on the secret history of the 9/11 investigation. And when I see something like that a person is churning out books that aren't specific to an object of interest, but that are just, if this big event happened, there must be a conspiracy, there must be a cover-up. I think it's fun, of course, but when it's a subject that means something to me, like the assassination of President Kennedy, well, then I don't. I don't want you digging around in the records just because there are inconsistencies. I want you to either have a point or not. And also, there's also the fact that I wrote a long review of a book by Vincent Bugliosi on the Kennedy assassination. Really felt like that got it out of my system. And I kind of told myself, you don't need to go after every ground ball that comes your way. You don't need to do that, or you'll be writing about Kennedy books forever. I've recently started questioning that. In fact, I've recently started doubting it, to the point almost where I've been thinking about making 2018 at Open Letters Monthly, the literary journal where I'm the managing editor. Sometimes I do a year-long subject. I've done a year with the Tudors. I did a year with the Romans. I'm now doing a second year with the Tudors. And I've actually thought recently about doing a year with the Kennedys. I don't know. One way or another, though, when I saw this book, brand new and for free, when I didn't even bother to request it in 2013, it acted as a guilty spur. So I got it, of course, and I will reread it or read it this weekend. And the next one is also an indulgence. We go back to the Dragon Riders of Pern. This is a book I've shown on this channel before. I already own a copy. So I got it just because it was 50 cents and I didn't want it to be thrown away. Better that it's in my safekeeping until I can find somebody to give it to. And it's this thing. It's magnificent. It's The Assassin's Cloak. It's an anthology of diaries and journals edited by Irene and Alan Taylor that goes just forever. It goes date by date in the calendar. And for each date, you get journal entries and diaries that cover centuries. And it's not just that, because, of course, you can see that kind of a thing in other productions. These two aren't the only people to do it. It's the way they do it. It's their choice of material. It is just fantastic. I opened it at random just before I started this video and came across an entry on in February of 1927 by Virginia Woolf. It's just fantastic. But I am forgetting, after 3 days, the most important event in my life since marriage. So Clive Bell described it. Mr. Zick has binged me. I am short-haired for life. Having no longer, I think, any claims to beauty, the convenience of this alone makes it desirable. Every morning I go to take up my brush and twist that old coil round my finger and fix it with hairpins, and then, with a start of joy, no, I needn't. In front there is no change. Behind I am like the rump of a partridge. This robs dining out of half its terrors. I love that. And you can find something like that on virtually every page of this book. It is a browser's delight. There's Samuel Pepys in here, of course, and Virginia Woolf, and a bunch of other people too, including a lot of people that you wouldn't think of. It beats any other anthology of journal entries and diaries that I've ever read, and I've read a lot of them. But I don't need a second copy, so I got it just because I didn't want it to be thrown away. It's too good for me to think that way. And then the next one is a rebuy. I don't actually own a copy, but it's The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I read when it first came out at the urging of a science fiction fantasy friend of mine, who told me at the time, this is going to be really big. This is really, really good. And I trusted him. I've mentioned it many times on this channel before. It's the role that these kinds of recommendations play in our lives. You don't just take it willy-nilly. I hate it when people do. Some people do. And I hate it when they do. You don't just take it willy-nilly. Instead, over time, you assess whether or not person X is a good source for recommendations on book Y. And once you've assessed that, then you take their recommendations, sometimes even blindly. I have the distinct honor and pleasure to be that kind of person to a lot of people with a lot of different kinds of books. But I want to stress, I also have those kinds of people, where if someone whose instincts on a certain kind of book I have come to trust tells me this is really good, then I invest the time in it, even if it ends up being bad, even if there are examples that are exceptions. It doesn't matter. It's a track record kind of thing. So I've had this book. I've had copies of it before, mass market and trade paperback. But I got this hardcover, not only because it was free, but also because, I don't know, something about the cover design. Aesthetically, so now I have The Name of the Wind. But the last thing I want to show you, the last thing I got on this particular book haul, is a classic. And I've had it on and off over the years, but usually in ratty mass market paperbacks. And when I saw it, for 50 cents a piece, I thought, you want to have this, to reread it, to consult it, and also because you love it. And it's this. It's Plutarchs Lives, translated by Thomas North. It's the great Thomas North translation of Plutarch. He worked on it for, God, the last quarter of the 16th century. You came out with it first in, I think, 1579. And it's not a translation from Plutarch. It's not a translation from the Greek, which you might think would disqualify it right away. For me, it's a translation from a French translation of Plutarch. But no, it doesn't disqualify, because North is a fantastic writer. His translation just booms and rolls along. It's just fantastic, and I know that, and I've loved it in excerpts and in little chopped up anthologies and bits and pieces. North, it made him famous. It consumed his whole life. It won for him from Queen Elizabeth I a pension. It wasn't a very generous pension, but this was a queen who she wasn't very generous to start with, and she was less generous than usual with men who, as one old wit put it more than a century ago, she was particularly not generous with men who could not convincingly simulate romantic attraction to women. Yeah, gotta love the Edwardians. So I thought, as long as I saw it in this gorgeous Heritage Press edition, I mean, these. I know I've seen these before. It's pretty much the only North Plutarch you can still find reliably in used bookstores. As soon as I saw it, I realized, why don't you have this? Of course, you should have this. I wait for the day when somebody does a big annotated 1-volume edition of the North Plutarch. Shakespeare ransacked North left, right, and center, not just for ideas, story ideas, although there was plenty of those. It burst Plutarch on the English scene in a way that you really had to be there. Plutarch he's an unending world. He's God's plenty, as a later translator referred to him. And until you experience him, you just don't know the treasure trove of stories that are in there. And Shakespeare knew immediately what he was encountering. He knew immediately these are stories that are perfect for the stage. But you know, it's not just that Shakespeare stole ideas or was inspired to take ideas from history from the North Plutarch. He also stole or used a lot of just explicit quotation. North is a great prose stylist, and Shakespeare knew that. He sensed it right away. So North floats through Shakespeare in phrase after phrase after phrase, and a nice big annotated edition, in addition to giving a really good introduction to the North Plutarch and its huge amount of influence, might also let readers know, you know, just a quick footnote every time there's an echo in Shakespeare or anybody else. But anyway, that was the final find. When I found these two in perfect condition, you know, sewn binding, I had to get them. So it's the North Plutarch in 2 volumes. It's Georgette Heyer. You can't go wrong if you're in the mood for smart dialogue and smart, funny prose. Then you can't go wrong. And to put it mildly, this week I am in the mood for that. And then The Name of the Wind, in a hardcover edition. The Assassin's Cloak, great collection of diary and journal entries. A Cruel and Shocking Act, great big history of the Kennedy assassination that I will dig into with a slightly guilty mind that I'm tardy at it. And The Dragon Rider's Pern. You know, in a nice 1-volume edition, nice big floppy trade paperback. So that's it. That is a secondhand book haul that's all over the map. but it might have things that were of interest to you, and either way, I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.